Welcome to another episode of the Brazen Podcast. Today we have Jen Potter with us, and she is going to be talking with us about how to structure your life and your schedule so that you stay focused, and then also how to kind of find your own path rather than just walking the path of least resistance. So, welcome, Jen. So
Thank you so much for
exciting to
having
have you here.
Thank you. Thank you both. I'm really excited about it.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about your background and how you came to kind of be an expert in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is pretty crazy. I am a serial entrepreneur and a venture builder, and I have severe ADHD. So, for someone who has all of these things going on all of the time, I'm also a mom of three and I have a 7-month-old puppy. So my life is insane. And, in order to juggle all of these things, my own business and as a venture builder, I actually help other people start their business. So I'm in that nitty gritty part of businesses when they're up, getting started and they need all the assistance. So my time is very valuable. And so, in order for me to be productive, in order for me to get all of the things done in the course of the day, in order for me to take on new projects and new things, which are every day, I'm like, I have a new idea. So, it's how can I fit this into my schedule is making sure that, I have these boundaries and I have these limits and I'm really honed in on how I utilize my time. So, having this like crazy schedule to begin with and getting really intentional with how I do it really helps me to be able to kind of get to the next level and be efficient. In short.
You mentioned that you have new ideas all day, every day, and Callie and I also both have that. And how
I
do
love
you
that.
avoid kind of the shiny object syndrome, or do you not avoid it and just go for it?
Well, it depends on the day. So usually what I do is if I have a great idea, I write it down and I keep this constant list of all of these great ideas. For me, I carry around my iPad everywhere I go. And I have a program in there that connects to my computer, to my iPad, to my cell phone. So when I have these great ideas, I'm like, oh, this is a great idea. I instantly write it down and I just push it off to the side. And if I keep thinking about it and I'm like, okay, I think this is something I need to talk more about. I have a really good friend. She's an amazing, like, close friend, but also a business friend. So when I have an idea, I'll go to her first and I'll be like, okay, so I have this great idea. And typically she's like, you know what, you take on too much, but that's a great idea. And for me, it's like, okay, I'm getting validation, or I'll go to, my husband. I'm like, I have this great idea. He's like, have you thought about it? And I'm like, yeah, I did this and this. He's like, all right, well, think about it a little bit more. And then, if you want to move forward. So unfortunately, everybody around me really supports all of the crazy things that I do. But it's when I come up with these ideas, they're typically not just for me to do. So if I have this really great business idea, my thought is, who do I know in a similar industry, or who do I know who would be a really great person to do this type of job? And I'll just like sometimes casually throw it out there to certain people. I'm like, I think this would be a really great business idea. What are your thoughts? And, just kind of, put it into the universe if it's something that's meant to happen. So we have these ideas all of the time, especially as I feel like it's very like this innovative thought process. If you have like ADHD, or, you're in business, you always have these thoughts. And I like to call myself a visionary sometimes. And I want to do all the things, but can I do them? And if I can't, are there other people who can kind of, draw them out for me? So it's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I love the idea that like you use your network to kind of help bring some of your awesome ideas into fruition.
Yeah. And well, because then if you have this idea and it just kind of is in your head, it's never going to go anywhere, right? You can write it down, and when you put it on paper, it's like already starting to make it real. And then if it's already out there and into the universe, now you're going to say, is this something that I could actually do? And if I can't do it now, all right, when can I put it on my list for the future? And so I typically do that too, like on the list that I keep. Is this something I could do now? Is this something I could do in the future? Keep my eyes open for someone who may be in this industry. So sometimes most of the time, a lot of it doesn't happen right away, but it's amazing when you start putting it out into the universe, how you start really paying attention to the people who are talking about these things or something related. I had this really great idea a few weeks ago about adding something to my business. And I kept saying, I'm not sure how I'm meant to get it to connect. But then every time I talk to someone, I'm like, "Ooh, have you thought about doing this in your business?" And then, "Ooh, have you thought about doing this in your business?" When I met with someone yesterday, and she literally said exactly what it was that I wanted to do. And that's how she helped to help others carry this process out without saying anything that I'm working on. So it was just the universe saying, "Hey, this is an opportunity. This is how you're going to carry it out." So pay attention to those things, because I think the universe all the time gives us opportunities that we don't necessarily pay attention to. That's the hippie in me.
Yeah, we talk a little bit about manifestation and the power of manifesting, those really great ideas and like big things in your life. And it's so cool that it's like there's science to back up the fact that when you actually like think about it as this is something that I want, and then you put it out there, like you just start noticing all of those opportunities. So yeah,
Right?
that cannot be understated. So
Yep,
important.
big on that. So big on manifestation, because the second we get it out of our heads, we can make it tangible, right?
Mhm.
And good idea or bad idea. And I think so often we come up with this really great idea, like we'll manifest it. We're like, "This is a great idea." And then I'll come to one of you and I'm like, "Hey, what do you think of my idea?" And you're just like, "Well, it's okay." And then the dream is squashed. So I tell a lot of people, when you come to somebody else and they tell you like your dream sucks, you're like, "I'm going to make this happen." Don't let somebody else's energy kind of, lower it. And that tends to happen to a lot of people. So surround yourself with people like me. Surround yourself with people who are going to influence that energy. So usually when I go to my people, they're like, "That's a great idea. How are you going to do it?" Not, "That's a terrible idea. You're not going to make that happen." So also creating that circle of people who are going to rise you up, it's going to make it happen.
Yeah, I find that, there are some people in my life who I've learned like, okay, maybe they're not the best person to like bring my little baby fragile idea to because I'm really excited about it, but it's not like fully formed yet. And it's really easy to just like totally squash it. But I think it's also super important to not be afraid to put it out there. So I know that like I have a lot of perfectionism and people pleasing and stuff in my mindset that I'm working through. And I've had issues in the past with not wanting to like put out an idea that's not fully formed yet. But working with Valerie, it's been nice to be able to throw out our like half baked or like quarter baked ideas and just like
Love that.
bat them back and forth. And, most of the time we just kind of drop it after like a conversation because we're like, yeah, that's probably not the best idea. But
You
we've
have
come
that
up with some of
support.
our best ideas that way. It's nice to really be able to embrace the idea that it doesn't have to even make sense or be perfect, but
Right?
just talking it out.
Yes. And even right now, like you might have this great idea and you have a conversation, both of you are like, "You know what, you're right, that's not right now." But 6 months to a year down the line, something else is going to happen. You're like, "Oh, remember when we had this conversation? This is why we had it. This is why this is happening." Because there's so often that I do things that sometimes in the moment they don't make sense. And as you kind of move through it, you're like, "Oh, this is why it makes sense." And I use this as an example when I was talking to a good friend the other day. I'm working on a certification that I would never in a million years actually think that it would be a certification that I need, because when I announce it, I think a lot of people are going to be like, "Why the hell is she going to do this?" So I'm putting it out into the universe. But knowing all the businesses that I own and run and start, it makes no sense. But I'm starting another company that down the road, this certification is going to mutually benefit. So
Mm.
for me, doing these things, it's like a building block, right? Like doing all of these things in order to create the next big picture. And sometimes it doesn't always make sense. So using that analogy from the outside looking in, it doesn't make sense. But as we continue to move forward, you're like, "Oh, that's why I did this. Oh, that's why this is connecting." And so often just kind of putting those pieces together to grow. So those big ideas that you quashed a few weeks ago, they're going to come to fruition.
Yeah. I love that
Totally.
so much because I'm someone that definitely, like, in my early history, jumped from job to job. And, everyone was like, "Oh, you're like in a different industry every time I talk to you." And for a while it felt like a bad thing. And then I'm like, no, it all came together like to this point where I'm at now. Like it all fed into that. And I don't think people understand the magic behind that.
No, they really don't. So that was me, right? Like I always had 5 jobs. I did
Mhm.
all of the things. And, if I went into my background and you'd be like, what is this chick doing? But because I was part of all of these industries, because I made all of these connections, my businesses are flourishing because I have connections amongst every industry. And it's amazing because we don't really think about it when we're going through it. You're like, oh, I want to try that. No, that's not for me. Oh, I want to try that. I kind of like that, but I want to try something else. And that is totally me. I'm like, I want to do all the things. And someone said to me a long time ago, it stuck with me. He looked at me, and it was somebody I looked up to, someone in business, like doing really well. And I was just joining a networking group, and he sat me down and he was like, you're kind of here. Like everything that you're doing is like here. You were just extra. I am extra. And he goes, "Why don't you just take everything and put it into a circle and like power all of your energy in a one place, like severe ADHD." I'm like, ding, ding, ding. I took that personal and I was like, well, maybe if I do this, that's how I'm going to be successful. And so I spent time really trying to create this really strong structure of what it is that I wanted to do. And it worked for like a millisecond because I started this really big company, but then all of a sudden I was like, bam, all of these companies like stemmed from it because I could not stay in that bubble. But some people can and some people can't. And, when talking about business and talking about ideas, having that core structure is super important. But for me, understanding the core structure of my business, because some people will come to me, and I'll kind of elaborate on this for just a second, because this is kind of what we're talking about. People have this great business idea. And a lot of times people will say, well, in order to be successful, you have to focus on one thing. That is true and it is not true. For someone like myself, I grow businesses, not just my own businesses. So even though it looks like I'm doing a million things, my core structure is like the bones of a business. So even though on the outside they all look different, everything that I'm doing is pretty much the same. So that's really important. So making sure you have a really strong structure. And if they all feed into each other, that's totally cool. Have all the business ideas and have them feed off of what you're doing. I'm here for it. So I digress. Go ahead.
I want to dig into that a little bit because I think that is a really good segue into the topic of like finding your own way. Because Valerie and I were talking about this not that long ago, where it's like we've kind of had shiny object syndrome a little bit. Over the last like couple of years, we've had a ton of ideas and we kind of fell into that trap for a long time where it's like, oh, well, we should do things this way because this is how it's been successful for other people. And like, we should try this because it works for them. And I think that there's so much power when you're able to put your blinders on almost and ignore what works for everybody else and focus on what works for you. Because like you were saying that it worked for you to kind of like have your attention like this rather than focused in on one thing. And so could you just talk a little bit about what the process was like of just kind of realizing that focusing in on that bubble wasn't going to work for you and really embracing like the structure that looks like crazy and unfocused and like chaotic to
Gotcha.
other people?
Yeah, absolutely. So thankfully, this aha moment came at a really crazy time in my life. So for me, I was kind of always all over the place. And it was in the midst of COVID and it was in the midst of getting pregnant with my last child. Like, for whatever reason, the universe just all handed me all of these things all at once. I went through something traumatic. I actually had a heart attack, went through something else traumatic, started this great business, got pregnant, and the universe like shut down. So all of this stuff happened in like a 6-month period. And so, this crazy thing just kind of happened in my world where all of these crazy things were just kind of happening. And it gave me like this opportunity to say, okay, how are you going to handle this? How are you going to handle the crazy that you're trying to juggle and be really good at what you're doing? And that was when I was focusing on just one business, but it was a business that because of COVID had to pivot. that company particularly, it's one of my first companies, well, second, third, at the beginning, big company. And so when I started it, we were just like a babysitting company. And I'm not just saying, babysitting like to like make it seem small, but the goal behind that company was to create a babysitting network to offer date night babysitting, as needed care, nothing crazy, with the goal of creating an agency, with the goal of getting to like this bigger like picture. And because of COVID, the company literally shut down before it even started. I started my company 11 days before they started offering assistance. So that means I didn't qualify for anything. So everything that I did, I paid out of pocket for. And then the world shut down and it was like, and you're responsible for all of this. So it was really a scary time in my life where I just said, okay, I just got to man up and figure this out. And so I pivoted that company and I changed it completely to a nannying agency that focused on frontline workers. And I went from, the company started at the end of 2020 with 6 employees. And to date, I've hired and placed over 500 employees directly through that company. So it went from like this really small, cute idea to like this really big thing that I just didn't expect. And as that started happening, all of these other businesses started like coming off the side of them, but they were all things that they all were part of it. So whenever I have a business idea, I'm like, oh, how can I connect that? Is that something that will grow the other company? Is that something that will like flourish off of the other one? And all of these companies stem off of a networking group that I created 8 years ago. So I started a networking group, play group for mommies, for moms, dads, anyone who wanted to connect with other like-minded people who had children. And I grew from that. So when we have these great ideas, I like to kind of bring it right back to, do they all either connect or have something that, has a similar backbone? And they don't have to, but for me, I noticed they all were very similar. And with that being said, it made sense that with the things that I wanted to do and the goals of where I wanted to be, becoming a venture builder, and someday my goal is to own a capital investment firm to help people grow businesses. And it just seemed like it was a very natural progression for me. And it was like, when I started this years ago, I would wake up and I would say, I don't know how I'm going to get to where I want to be. I have all of these crazy ideas and I have no idea what that's going to look like. Someone would ask me what I do and I'm like, well, it depends on the day. And I typically say that to people. I'm like, it depends on the day. It depends on where I am. It depends on the time. It depends on, and that's a very true statement, but I'm very clear about what I do and why I want to do it. And I woke up a few weeks ago and I actually sat up out of bed, and I'll apologize for swearing in advance, but I was like, how the fuck did I get here? I literally just like sat straight up and I was just like, oh my goodness, all of the things that I want to achieve, like I can see them. I can see the path. And while getting to this position, I had no idea how I was going to get here and what that would look like. It actually started to become clear as to why all of these things were happening. And the more and more you pay attention to the universe, to your manifestations, to the things like, and I'm not trying to be a super hippie when I say that, but like, I mean it sincerely, that if you start paying attention to the people that you're surrounding yourself with, the intentions that you have in business, it all starts to get clearer. So that's a long sentence of all of that.
The thing that came to my mind as you were talking was like, the moral is kind of just, you need to trust the process, because it all feeds into like this really amazing end product if you let it.
Absolutely. And we don't know what that's going to be. I know where I want to be. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I'm going to give myself expectations and set goals to get to the next step. But we have to anticipate a pivot. Just like you said, I have this great idea. Well, is it going to work, or should we be doing something else? And you like nail on the head when you said it. That may work for you, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for me. We have different personalities, and your business model may work because of how you handle things, where for me, and I'm not saying anything about your personality, but I'm just using this as an example. I have a very forward personality. So the way that you handle things may not work for me because it may come off completely different. My social media is going to look completely different. The things that I, focus on when I'm talking about business are completely different. So putting those blinders on, I think, are really important, but also educating yourself along the process. I am huge podcast, love podcasts. Why? Because I get to hear other amazing people in business talk about their experiences, what they think and how they do things. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to take a little bit of that. Ooh, I'm going to take a little bit of that. And I will slowly add that into the things that I do. I take ideas all the time. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to create my own using other people's great ideas, but all together.
Yeah, totally. I think there's like different seasons where it's like, okay, maybe you're in the season of like just taking in all of this information, like how they do it and how they do it and how they do it. And then I think the key is just having the confidence in yourself and your abilities and your strengths to be able to not feel like you have to do it the exact way that they did and be able to take the things that work for you and make them your own.
Right. And, that kind of goes around like what people say about imposter syndrome.
Mm.
They're like, do you ever feel like imposter syndrome? I'm like, I just think it was made up by somebody to make other people feel like crap. And I don't feel like it should be a thing, because if someone's doing something and that's like, that speaks to you, that doesn't mean you're impersonating them. It means that like you want to do something similar, but for yourself. I
Mm.
always like, I'll kid around and I say this all the time, and I'm sure I will probably get back to them someday. But, there are two people that are really big, that are public speakers, that are business owners, that I just really adore for different reasons. And ironically, they have the same last name. So I love Mel Robbins. I think she's fantastic. I love her personality. I love how blunt she is, how unapologetic she is. And there's a lot of things about her. I mean, there are things about her I'm sure I don't like, but there are a lot of things about her as a speaker that I would always say that's someone I'm aspiring not to be, but to be able to deliver a message on that platform, because I really enjoy what she has to say. And as a business owner and not a public speaker, because I'm not on board with it. And so if he hears this, then, I'm sorry. No, just kidding. But Tony Robbins, I'm not a fan of his public speaking, because he doesn't speak to me on that level, but he's a business owner and he does all of the things. And I'm just like, I want to do all of the things. So I always say, if you were to smash the two together and make a baby, that would be me, because I want to do all the businesses and I want to talk, but I don't want to be either of them because they're their own person. But there's a lot of traits that they exhibit that I see in myself. I
Mhm.
see that in myself. And I'm like, how can I get to that level to be able to talk at that level, to be able to speak to people, to hear that message, hearing it from me. So it's owning what you want to do and not feeling like just because somebody else is doing it, we're all different people. And it's like coffee, right? And as I'm sitting here drinking my coffee, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, I use this analogy all the time. They coexist in the same parking lot a lot of times. And I like Starbucks. I won't drink Dunkin' Donuts. We're two completely different types of coffees. And I think that's important when it comes to people. And I'm big on collaboration. I do not believe in competition. I let that go so long ago that when I meet other people who do what I do, I'm like, oh, that's amazing. What works for you? Do you have any suggestions? Do you need any other people? Like, can I refer somebody to you? Because when you start letting go of that competition with other people, you elevate to a different level.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. And I think that the whole like competition versus collaboration is just a difference. Like, are you in the scarcity mindset or the abundance mindset? Because either you believe that like there is not enough to go around and you need to like fight for scraps, or you can work with other people. And I heard this thing recently that kind of ties into it where it's like, okay, so you see somebody doing the same thing that you want to do. Are you thinking, oh, I can't do it because they're already doing it? Or do you think I can do it because they're doing it? Like they're making it work. I can do the same thing too, but my own way.
Right. And that mindset is, I can totally do this, but how can I do it so it's me? And I love that so much, because when you get rid of, that, like you said, scarcity mindset, there's so much out there. There are hundreds of thousands of coaches and consultants and speakers and all of the things. What separates you from the other people? Keep doing your thing and just keep elevating yourself. Don't compete with other people. Like, I don't believe in competition whatsoever with anybody. And when you actually get to that point in your life, I also don't care what other people think about me. So I just think that's a product of me turning 40 this year. And I think I really do, because someone will say something to me. I'm like, well, that's great. I'm glad you feel that way, but that's not how I'm going to handle things. I feel that way about business and in my personal life. And when you start letting go of trying to make other people happy and other people's expectations, you're also going to vibrate at a different level. You're going to know that like this world has so much money and has so much abundance and has so many clients. You too aren't going to be able to take care of all of these people in the world. There's got to be other people out there to be able to support, everybody else. And when you have that mindset, things just start gravitating towards you differently. You
Mm.
change the way that you focus on things. And that's for me personally. But I feel like the more the message comes out, the more I can only hope that people start to feel the same way. It changes your thought process on business and life.
Oh my gosh. I love everything that you're saying. So let me kind of summarize what we've covered here. So basically, you need to trust the process and trust yourself and acknowledge the fact that you bring a specific set of strengths and gifts and personality traits that nobody else can. And you just need to write down all of your awesome ideas because they're going to come into fruition in one way or another. You need to network and connect and collaborate with all the other people around you because there's more than enough to go around. And the more connections you make, the more you can manifest in your life, and embrace your unique core structure of ideas, because the way that your brain works is different than how everyone else's brain works and what works for you. Do you have
Absolutely.
anything else to add?
Well, yeah, I do just a little bit.
Yeah.
So because we talked about all of that broad topic, right? Like I feel like we kind of briefly talked about, how we make all of that happen. And
Mm.
that goes into being super intentional with our time and being able to get all of that out. Because while we talk about all of those things, I want to make sure that everybody understands, create boundaries and limits within your day and your schedule, both personal and business. You want to achieve all of the things. Be super intentional. For anybody that works with me, clients, family, anybody. If it's not in the schedule, it does not exist. My kids know it. My husband knows it. My whole family knows if it's not in the schedule, it does not exist. Not in my calendar, not going to happen. Next, I am very intentional with my time. My kids are my life. They are insane. My house is loud and crazy. So before 9 and after 5, nobody wants to have a phone call with me. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's insane in my household. And so for me, my time is very intentional, 9 to 5. If you call before 9, chances are you're not going to hear from me till midday. If you call after 5, you're not going to hear from me till the next day. And when you set that intention for personal and business, my friends won't even text me at night. And if they do, they know that they're not going to get a text message back unless I have time. My clients know, you send me a message to my personal line, I will not answer. If you send me a message after like 4:59, you're not going to hear from me. And when you set yourself up with those intentions, people will start abiding by them and respecting your boundaries, and you're able to like eliminate like this crazy amount of stress that you unintentionally created because you're like instant gratification. I don't believe in instant gratification. I do so many things. Instant gratification doesn't exist. If I looked at my cell phone right now, I have 17 text messages. I'll get to them, and I set time in the course of my day to respond to text messages, time to respond to my emails, time to have podcasts. I'm very intentional with the times that I set. And by doing that, it allows me to do all of the creative things. It allows me to live my, that freeing life. As a business owner, you're going to work 7 days a week at the beginning, and just know that that happens sometimes. Even in my own life, I have to say, all right, I got to bend it just a little because I'm starting something else. But knowing that you don't do that all the time, it stops burnout. It allows you to be more creative, think of more ideas, do all of the things. So even though my life seems super crazy, I'm really intentional with time. And I love always having conversations about micro scheduling, because even though it sounds intense, if you say I'm only going to spend 15 minutes doing something in the course of a day, do you know how efficient you can be? It's
Mm.
amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So to wrap all of those things together, I think being able to do all of the things is just being more intentional and creating boundaries for yourself, especially in business or owning a business. You have to create those boundaries for yourself in order to do all the things you want to do.
I love that. I really like the micro scheduling too. We're all about micro goals. Like Callie and I, we talk about that a lot, but the micro scheduling is
Yeah.
even better.
It's really great because especially like me, I have that mind that wants to go, that if I can say, 15 minutes, put my phone down, keep it away from me. I don't keep my phone next to me when I'm getting stuff done, and I'll work work on emails for 15 minutes. Like I do all of my emails first thing in the morning. So then the rest of the day, I don't have to worry about it. If you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and no, I'm not saying you have to do this, but for me, if I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, my kids aren't up, they're sleeping. Nobody's calling my phone because they're all sleeping. I can get 2 hours worth of work done in 45 minutes. Why? Because I'm not being distracted. I'm not having somebody bother me. And so I find the times that I can be the most efficient too. And then if it's times that I want to be creative, I schedule that out. So I actually have it in my calendar. These are the times I work out. These are the times, and they're all different because I'm training for a marathon. So like they're all over the place. But then I also have, this is the time that I'm going to sit and I'm going to work on this. And this is the time that I'm going to sit and I'm going to work on this. And if we schedule that out in the course of a week, even if half of it doesn't happen, sometimes you're going to get derailed and things are going to happen. But if you're more intentional with your time and you actually pre-plan it, half of it's going to happen no matter what. Because you're going to say, oh, this is where I have to be. This is what I have to do. I'm not a person who likes to run in certain weather. But if I know that I'm training for something, I will get up despite me complaining about it, and I will go and do it because it's in the calendar and I have to do it. But if I didn't put it on my calendar and I'm like, oh, well, I have a coffee date, so I really can't go do it. We make up excuses as to why we can't or why we shouldn't. So it's always, I can, I will, creating those positive, affirmations to really help us to get through to the next thing. This is a great idea, not, well, do you think it's terrible? It's going to happen if you think it's fantastic.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, Jen, how about you tell our listeners where they can find you if they want to learn more about you or learn how they could work with you? Where would they go?
Absolutely. So all over social media, if you look up Jennifer Potter, jen@epic47.com. So that's the easiest way. Send me a direct email. I love talking to people. I love expanding my network and talking to people all of the time. If you didn't get that already, social media, Facebook, Jen, I think it's actually Jen Potter, but it's Jen Live Your Best Life. Instagram, Jen Live Your Best Life. YouTube, Jen Live Your Best Life. My goal is to live your best life. So it's all over my social media. I went to change it to a public handle and I couldn't get rid of it. And Instagram is like, well, in order for you to get the status, you have to change it to your last name. And I could not do it. And I go, no, I'm going to wait till my status gets big enough that they're going to accept this as my last name. So I'm like, I am not changing this. So because it's just something, when I say it all the time, I wake up every day, I see it all over my social media. I hashtag Jen Live Your Best Life. I'm reminding myself every day, Jen, live your best life, live the life that you're meant to live, and, just keep doing it and tell other people to do the same. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so, so much for being here and sharing all of that information with us, because I know that Valerie and I are both feeling really inspired right now. And I know that everybody listening to this is going to want to go out and just tackle the day. So, so thank you so much. And if you loved this episode, please rate and review and share it with a friend who could use some motivation and inspiration. And we will talk to you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.